Welcome to Women of Courage, Season 2, where my guests continue to share their courageous stories. It is my hope that these stories will encourage and inspire you as you face your own challenges, that you will take action to courageously pursue your own dreams and passions, no matter what obstacles are presented along the way. I'm Ann Miner, your host for the show, and my guests are women of courage. Women from all walks of life, whether their challenges involve their health, their family, their business, or their career. It is apparent that every aspect of their life was impacted. Our women of courage have found the strength and the courage to confront, to overcome, and to succeed in spite of everything. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment with today's Woman of Courage.
If I were brave, if I were brave.
Welcome back to Women of Courage. I'm here today with Elizabeth McCormick, and you'll see that she's wearing her Black Hawk helicopter uniform. And the very first thing we want to know is, how did you become a Black Hawk helicopter pilot?
Well, you know, I have to tell you the truth. Anyone can get one of these on eBay. But I was an unemployed military wife. So I'd finished college and then I couldn't get a job. So I was unemployed with a college degree, and we were at Fort Polk, Louisiana, which is where my starter husband, anybody else got one of those? Yeah. My starter husband was stationed, and I just couldn't get a job, and I was really frustrated, and I was really unhappy. I wasn't, in my book I call it this restlessness. I had this restlessness inside me that things were not as they were supposed to be. And so one night I looked at the starter husband while he was sleeping in his shaved head, and I thought, you know, if he can be in the Army, I can do that. Why can't I do that? And I really just decided to go for it and to do something more with my life than where I was at. And it required a massive change and a change in my belief system. And so I went out I researched it and found out that the coolest job was being a helicopter pilot. So I said, okay, I'll do that. I didn't know it was hard. I didn't know that there weren't very many women in. I just really felt like that was what I was supposed to do, and it felt right. And I went out to the flight line, and I looked at the helicopters, and I was just filled with that rightness. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is it. And so I researched it and found out how to do it, and then started hitting the obstacles.
Well, why don't you tell us about some of those?
So the first obstacle was at the very beginning. I had to go into the recruiter and tell the recruiter, you know, I want to go warrant officer flight training program, because I'd done my research and I knew what I needed to do. And he told me no. And, you know, I grew up so shy, I wouldn't call my own hairdresser, which is really funny being a motivational speaker and audiences of, you know, 6, 7, 10,000 people. But that shy girl is still in me. And for me to stand up to someone in authority at that point of my youth, I mean, it's 23, was just unheard of. It just wasn't a comfort zone moment, right? But anything extraordinary doesn't happen in the comfort zone moments. And so I looked at him and I said, why not? And he asked me, we went back and forth, and I kept saying, why not? And he, well, you can't because of this, and you can't because of that. And then I said, why not? And he says, well, I don't know how to do the paperwork.
Oh my goodness.
He didn't know how to do his job.
And that was an obstacle for you.
And that was the first obstacle I had. And, you know, if I had thought it was going to get any better, not a chance. I went to the flight doctor to do my physical, and he looks at me and he says, little girl, don't you know flight school's really hard? And what I learned out of that whole, and when I went to take my testing that I had to take, the flight aptitude skills test, they call it the fast test, it's really slow.
Yes.
When we went to take the test, the proctor issuing the test looks at me and says, little girl, don't you know this test is really hard? So what I learned was, if they believe it's hard for them. But I don't have to take on their belief. If I believe it's easy, then for me it'll be easy. But we get to decide what that belief is going to be, not anybody else. And when we allow someone else's opinion on their belief to sway ours, well, shame on us, because we don't have to do that.
And you didn't.
I didn't. I stuck with it. And it wasn't until I got to the step right before where my whole packet went before a big promotion board, a big almost like a jury, and they judge you and say, yes, you're good to go move on, or no, you need something else. And it wasn't until I got there and they started looking and started piling all the credentials in, wife of a military member, multiple college degrees, which got me no job. And, everything kind of piled up, and they're like, tested high on these tests, did this, and, passed the physical, passed all these, I met every criteria. And when they piled it all up, I remember, one of the officers on the board said, this is the best candidate we've ever had come through.
Wow.
But yet it took all those steps and all those people saying me no all the way through to get to that point. And have to be really firm in that belief and shore up your belief. I mean, it's absolutely essential for us to accomplish anything we want to accomplish in our life, is to believe in ourselves, even if no one else believes in you.
And so you went on, and there were more more obstacles ahead. Right?
I did. When I got to flight school, so I went through basic training, Warrant Officer Candidate School, which back then was one of the toughest schools the Army had, because there was no male or female standard. The physical standards were the same for men and women. And do you think they lowered it for the women they were letting in?
I hope not.
No, it would have been nice if they had, but no, the physical standards were very demanding. We started with 7 women and only 2 finished because of the physical standards. I had to do the same push-ups as the men. And we are not built the same like that. No, there's no way. I had to do the same push-ups. I had to do the same sit-ups. I had to do the same jumping jacks. I had to do the run times and the same. And it was extremely demanding physically. And I managed to get through that course and then get on to the next phase, which was flight school.
Mm-hmm.
And in flight school, during the academic part, no problem, other than I had to learn we had to learn every single system of a Huey helicopter, which is what we flew in flight school then. So I had to know what it was called, what it did, what happens if it fails, and what's the emergency procedure for every single component of a helicopter.
Wow.
And I was not a mechanic chick. I had no idea how to do any of that. So I just, I had to study. It was up to me. It was truly, when it comes down to it, when it comes down to when things get hard, it is a you and you world. And it was totally up to me. So we went through class all day, physical fitness, everything we went through all day. We'd have study group as a group at night, because we didn't have laptops and computers to study in your room, right? We had to go to a tech center that had paper,
Yes.
and we'd study. And then I'd have to study for hours after that just to keep up, because I was the only girl in the class. And that was up to me. And I did that. And then we get out to the flight line. It's our first day to fly. We're so excited. We get to fly. And my male flight instructor, there were no female flight instructors. There weren't that many in. And the male flight instructor looks up at me and goes, "Oh, great." Because he didn't believe women should fly.
Oh my goodness.
I happened to have drawn a prejudiced flight instructor. And, flying a helicopter is hard enough. We'll just say that. You have to be smooth on the controls, and actually women make the best helicopter pilots, because it takes a soft touch on the controls. And we have a softer touch. But this instructor pilot would scream at me every day, "You're stupid. You don't deserve to be here. You're wasting my time. And my all-time favorite, a monkey can fly better than you."
Wow.
Every day.
I can't imagine.
And that soft touch would get really tight. And then I would do what was called over-controlling. I'd go too far left, and then I'd go too far right, and then I'd go too far left, and we started doing a pendulum thing.
Which I can't imagine was good.
It's bad. It's really bad. Don't do that. And he would take the controls, and he would, and he'd say, I have the controls. Because somebody has to be on the controls. There's no autopilot.
Right.
He'd say, I have the controls. A monkey can fly better than you. You're stupid.
Wow.
And he would berate me again and again. And then he'd say, okay, now you have the controls, try again.
Oh, really building you up for the next go round.
And it continued and continued and continued until the last week I was failing the course.
My goodness. Well, that was a lot of pressure to work under. And when we come back, we're going to hear more about how you overcame that particular obstacle. Stay with us. We'll be back with more of Elizabeth's story in just a moment.
If I were brave, if I were brave.
Welcome back to Women of Courage. I'm here today with Elizabeth McCormick, Black Hawk helicopter pilot. And just before the break, you were telling us about your instructor, your flight instructor. And now we want to know more about how did you manage to survive all that?
Well, it's almost to the end of the course, and I'm still failing. I can't hover, the hardest maneuver to learn how to do, and because it requires such a soft touch, and I didn't have it. And I had no idea how I was going to get through that. I just really, my body language, my posture, everything was defeated, but I refused to quit. And what I learned is that when things get really, really hard, and you feel like quitting, that you just show up. You just keep showing up and keep showing up, and don't give up. Be tenacious with it. And I just refused to quit. They wanted me to quit. It was easier paperwork for them, right? They wanted me to quit, and I just kept showing up. So when I showed up the second to last week of this phase I had to pass, I didn't know how it was going to happen. And when I walked in, it was a substitute instructor, a young, active duty, open-minded, educated male instructor, and he taught me. And that instructor taught me more in 5 days than the other instructor had taught me at all. And I learned how to hover, and I learned all the maneuvers I needed. But that next week, final exam week, it was ugly. Because I had 6 weeks of doing it wrong and 1 week of doing it right. And practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And having to do something correctly and overcome all those bad habits was even harder than just doing it right from the beginning. So I passed last. It was the ugly pass, it was the pass that you're just like, whoo, I'm glad I got through that. It's over. And I got through it. But it was a tough time. And then after that, it got even tougher. Because as I got into the next phase, well, let me just back up, because it was right around that same time when things were finally starting to go right that my starter husband called me up and said, it's time for you to quit and come home and be a wife where you belong. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, to me, we weren't physically together. We were 9 hours apart at different bases. And it was really hard. It was really hard. And he, I said, so you're asking me to choose? Well, first of all, I signed a 6-year contract with the Army. There's no way they were going to let me out of a contract after being in training. But second of all, I'm like, really? You were involved in this decision-making process going in. Well, how could you do this? I really felt betrayed that he didn't support me and believe in me, and he couldn't, that he couldn't hang. What's up with that? You want me to be a wife? I knew there was more for me than that. And so I said, okay, I choose flight school. And he filed for divorce, sent me the legal bill to pay the legal bill. And so I did, and then he volunteered for a deployment to Kuwait from his unit. We were in between the two Iraq conflicts, so it was peacekeeping operations. And I continued in flight school until I started getting nauseous every morning in the simulator trying to simulate flight, and it's already, you get nauseous pretty easy in it because there's a lag, and when you have that lag between the physical motion and the aircraft motion, it can cause vertigo and nausea, and they want you to overcome that in the simulator before you get in a helicopter.
Good idea.
Yeah, safety first. And so I was nauseous every morning, and I'm like, really? And so they sent me to the doctor, and I had no idea that I was 4 months pregnant. One of the few females in the whole course, and then in the middle of a divorce, and ended up pregnant. And I was just broken. I didn't know how I was going to get through that. It was like, scarlet letter, and Hester, everybody pointing at Hester for the A. I didn't have the A, I had the belly, and I was the talk of the town.
I can imagine.
And it was one of the most difficult things that I went through, and I went through it alone. I was a single parent in flight school, and I went through it completely alone. I didn't have role models. There was no one tucking me under the wing. In fact, my command did without talking to me, processed all the paperwork to kick me out, and wanted me to, when I got back from after having my daughter, who's now 18, I got back to the unit to go back to work, and they're like, here's your paperwork, just sign here. And I'm like, what? What's this paperwork? And I start reading it, and it's to process me out of the military. They're like, you can't stay in as a single parent. And at this point, you have to have them figured out. I'm like, just tell me you can't. Just tell me, and I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. And I said, no, I joined to fly. I'm going to fly. And so we did I said, I'm not signing this. I'm not doing this. And I read the regulations, and I figured out how I could stay in, and I had to have short-term care, long-term care. I had to have a death plan. I had to have all money in bank accounts for different people to take care of my child in case something happened when I was flying. And I did it. And then I was a single parent who decided to breastfeed out at the flight line in flight school. Only girl in the class.
Just pushing the limits.
Oh, well, if you don't ask for what you want, you're never going to get it. So I went to my instructors and I said, they're like, yeah, we know you just had a baby. And I'm like, yeah, but I kind of want to breastfeed too. So can we, work something out? And so they made the break. We had 2 breaks. They made one short, one long, so I could have time to, bring the industrial strength toolbox pump out and take care of it. And then I had to start flying with that. And I remember the outlet in the women's room didn't work.
Oh.
So I went to the command and I was like, look, this is what I want to do. And they were like, luckily he'd had children, thank goodness. And so I went to him and I said, this is what I want to do. And he's like, okay, you can use my office. I'm going to put out a memo and tell everybody that when my lights, I'm not going to lock the office, but when the lights are off, that, no one is to go in my office. I'm like, okay. So I started using his office, and it went a couple weeks, no problem. So I would take care of it before and take care of it after by flying. And then one day I'm in there at the desk, and the pump's going, and all the women that have done this know the sound. It's like the where the vacuum takes the suction, and it's fun. And so I have everything, and it's under the flight suit and under the zipper, and I'm got the T-shirt hanging over it, and wearing a big size, and I'm sitting there, and I'm at this desk, and the door opens, and this guy he's like, I just need something out of the desk, and I'm like, come back later. And he goes, no, I just need something out of the desk. I said, this isn't a good time. And the pump's going, and I'm like, and I said, come back later. He's like, no, I just need something out of the desk. And he walks up and he's like, right here. And he puts his hand on the desk and then he looks. And he goes, because it's a pump and the little tubes hanging and yeah. And he's like, and he backs out of the room. He's like, and he shuts the door. And, I really think I scared him lactose intolerant. And the very next day, the outlet got fixed.
There you go.
But you have to push for what you want. You can't sit back and let things happen. I talk about, in my speeches, I talk about being really present in your life and really aware of what you do and the impact you have, and don't settle. Do not be willing to settle when you know that you're meant for something more.
And that is the message that you take forward in your speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next for you?
Well, I mean, gosh, I'm speaking at 150 engagements this year.
Which is absolutely amazing.
It's growing pretty well for me, and I'm continuing to speaking on larger stages, conventions, audiences, sales meetings, and just keep spreading the message of empowerment and leadership. And my new book came out, The Pilot Method, and it's about leading yourself in life. Because if you have to lead yourself first before you can lead others well. And I think the hardest person to lead is yourself, right? We get in our own ways. And as women, we especially get in our own way. We do. We find roadblocks and distractions, and we think we have to take care of everyone else first before we deserve to take care of ourselves and to be there for ourselves. And you don't. The fact of the matter is that when we take care of ourselves, it's honoring everyone else in our life by being our best for everyone else. And that's something that no one can make you do.
Except you.
Except you. Because it's that you and you, right? And if you don't take care of yourself, what does that tell your children and your family? That you're not worth taking care of? That you're not worth of the respect that you don't show yourself? I mean, I really think there needs to be a shift in that. And it's not selfish to take care of ourselves. It's unselfish. Because it's showing, we're emulating what we want our younger generations to know, is that we are women of worth and of courage and worthy of being our best selves for the world around us.
That is terrific. Now, a few words of wisdom from a wonderful, wacky, one-of-a-kind woman, Jezebel Peppa.
Peppa here. Do you notice anything different? I have a new red boa. I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna go look for a nice little red chapeau. Have to find the perfect one though. Have you ever wanted to try something new? If you want to try something so bad that, as my mother used to say, you could taste it, go for it. Try something new. Now I'm gonna warn you, there's gonna be lots of people all around you that are gonna say, you can't do it. Here's why it won't work. I want you to march through all of those no's and find your yes. And when you find your yes, you will be so happy. So try something new, just like me. And when you find your yes, you celebrate that yes. And remember to celebrate the Jezebel in you.
Thank you, Jezebel. And thank you to Elizabeth McCormick. You have certainly inspired us today. And I, for one, am motivated to move forward and to take that next step towards my own goals. As our thank you gift, you will receive a copy of my book, Succeeding in Spite of Everything. And you will take home our beautiful centerpiece by Floral Occasions in Ingersoll. Now, we would love to hear from you, our audience. You know, last season, many of you wrote to our guests directly to let them know how you had been inspired and encouraged by their stories. We would love to be able to share your comments and feedback on future episodes of Women of Courage. So please, contact me directly at the email address on your screen below. Remember, in every setback lies opportunity. Opportunity for you to call up all that you have learned through other people's stories and what you've learned through your own personal experience. To rely on your core beliefs and your values. To rally your strength and your courage, to find your way through, to overcome, and to succeed in spite of everything. Until next time, be courageous.
What step would I take today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I